In this episode of TNT's Fashion Podcast, TNT because we're explosively good, we'll be covering the Roaring 20s. The Roaring 20s fashion scene brought about iconic and timeless styles, many of which helped shape those that exist today. It was a time of prosperity, fun, and individual freedom for both the elite and working class. It also marked the rise of consumerism. Since fashion reflects the period, it is no surprise that men's and women's styles started highlighting these changes. By the start of the 1920s, though, styles had become more relaxed than ever before. More manufacturers constructed clothes with softer fabrics and slightly looser fits. Formal wear became more diverse, elegant, and grisly, though it was still functional.
The 1920s saw the change in an era. Gone were the days of the Victorian/Edwardian-inspired tightly laced corsets and rigid silhouettes. In its place came shorter, boxier dresses, more suited to reflect the modern age and accommodate the changing needs of an active new woman. This new woman was free-spirited and independent, educated and uninterested in marriage and children. In fashion, she wanted to be fashionable while being comfortable. The post-war American economy was experiencing a boom, and clothing manufacturers were producing in surplus. High fashion couture from France was produced and reimagined for a growing mass market, and with many Americans having a more expendable income, consumer goods were easily acquired. The passing of the 19th Amendment on August 26, 1920, is thought to have had a lot to do with the changing sentiment towards fashion, particularly its role in the daily lives of women and girls. The beauty revolution of the 1920s saw the rise of youth and beauty becoming a valued commodity, mirroring in many ways the world today. Women found themselves being marketed to in high volumes, which boosted the sales of cosmetics and perfumes. And it was in this time period that health and beauty clubs began popping up. Women began working out to slim down and achieve a trendy body type. The in body of the Roaring 20s was slim and boyish, flat chest, no butt, slender, and fit. Hair was either cropped or pinned by bobby pins to achieve the iconic flapper look.
A common misconception of the new women's fashion was their supposed abandonment of corsets. In reality, while the way many women perceived corsets changed, the function of it remained the same, helping women achieve a desired look. These corsets had no boning and instead of shaping the waist, flattened the body.
Two main silhouettes popped into style, the robe de style in the early part of the decade and the garcon. With this, American women left behind once and for all the S-bent corset of the Edwardian age. The robe de style came from French designer Jean Lavin and drew from historical lines that combined the relaxed long waist with the full wide skirt of 18th century gowns. This trend would be repeated again in the 1950s. The garcon look was epitomized by the chemise dress, a garment cut straight at the sides and left unfitted at the waist. While its original definition was that of undergarments, it became widely used to describe loose-fitting outerwear for either evening or day dresses.
Plenty of cultural changes in the 20s directly influenced the growth of fashion. The rise of Hollywood influence increased the fashion market, and the rise in consumerism promoted ideals of fulfillment and freedom. The Charleston dance craze, and in 1926, Coco Chanel debuted the little black dress, a concept that would soon be a classic staple piece in any woman's closet.
But it wouldn't be the 1920s if we didn't talk about the hemlines. Hemlines didn't rise that drastically, at least in comparison to today's standards. Everything in fashion is gradual and nothing happens overnight. The 1920s were much the same, being effects of pre-war fashion, with women's clothes becoming gradually less fitted. In the early part of the decade, hemlines rose above the ankle. They rose again halfway through the 20s to the mid-calf, and by 1926, the hemline sat just below the knee. It is important to note, however, that it would not be until the 1960s where women's skirts rose above the knee.
Similarly, in the 1920s, men's fashion was the start of menwear as we know it today. The post-war era was full of plastic sophistication with a splash of fun, a combination that was unheard of in the early Victorian era. Men's clothing in the 1920s were mostly neutrals with patterns, but accessories were added as a pop of bright color to an outfit. The influence fashion had was caused by a boom in technologies for entertainment. Radio, movies, and magazines helped spread the word about what people were wearing and how they were decorating their homes or designing public buildings, causing trends and norms to form. Additionally, more young men were attending colleges and universities, creating time for casual dress. As menwear became less regiment, while leisure clothes and sportswear made their debut. Sportswear consists of plaid, plain, checkered, or tweeded pants, kickers, and suit jackets. Long sleeve striped shirts with white collars, knitted vest or wool suit vest. Tweeded caps, which were worn for sports such as golf, and various flat hat styles, like the Newsy Boy and Ivy caps or boulder caps added to the style.
1920s fashion had differentiating looks for day and evening activities. Women's day dresses often featured wide open boat necks or V necklines. They were made in cheerful, small pattern cotton prints and gingham check, and materials could range from silk and satin to chiffon or organdy. Their slip-on design removed the need for assistance dressing. They had long sleeves, which usually reached at least the elbow, and had detailing specifically to emphasize the desired long and lean figure. These included dangling neckties, buttons, pleats, and thin collars. The lace-up boots of pre-war American women were replaced by a more casual style. They were called the Oxford. These shoes were practical and sturdy with a low heel. The cloche hat became a staple on women's heads. It was a fitted bell-shaped hat, its name deriving from cloche, the French word for bell. Couture houses like Levin and Molyneux, a British fashion designer, opened ateliers to join in manufacturing hats that would precisely match their design.
Men's daywear consisted of a jacket, shirt, and pants. 1920s men's shirts embraced bold yellows, blues, purples, oranges, and even pink solids, and vertical stripes. Neckties and bow ties were also colorful, clashing against the shirt body. Early 1920s dress shirts had detachable white round collars called club collars, detachable pointed collars, and later spread and spear-pointed collars came into fashion in the 20s too. Casual men's 1920 shirts were often plaid printed with open collars, while workwear was plain wool two-pocketed shirts. Most shirts had matching collars that were either solid or striped. Casual shirts didn't have a collar at all and came in neutral or pastel colors like lilac or sky blue. Casual garments with a turned-down collar, single cuffed or cufflinks, a single barrel cuff with a button, plaid or candy-striped shirts also became trendy. Men's pants changed from skinny jazz trousers to wide straight-leg trousers and the oversized Oxford bags in a span of just 10 years. All men's 1920s pants had very high waists and waistbands held up with button suspenders, flat front pants that fitted high with or on the waist, and distinct patterns such as striped, plaid, checkered, tweeded, or herringbone. Jackets and overcoats tended to match the suit and pants. For example, if the suit or pants were wider and looser, the outerwear would have a similar fit. They were less colorful than shirts or pants, leaning more towards darker nude tones. They were normally on the heavier side and with a closer fit to the body than most modern attire. Oxford shoes took the United States by storm, as they were more comfortable alternative to other formal options. Other popular options included wingtip shoes, patent leather shoes, two-tone sports shoes, high-cuff work boots, and winter boots. Most evening activities were more formal, calling for a different type of look than daytime wear. Suits were the biggest outfits for men in the 20s. Three-piece suits were sold as more formal attire. The main fabric used to make suits was wool, and their colors came as navy blue, brown, or medium gray. Yet by the end of the decade, they had become more loose and colorful. During the 1920s, suit pants underwent two particularly notable style changes. Sharp fronts and back creases replaced side creases, and cuffs replaced the flat hems. Their designs would be considered more feminine today, as it gave an illusion of more of an hourglass figure in the sense that there was equal length proportions of shoulders and hip, and the button closed right at the waistline. In comparison to today, where they are more of an upside down triangle shape with a lower button and smaller hip line. Accessories added to the overall outfit of formal wear. The designs of ties options expanded to include horizontal stripes, plaids, and solid colors like purples, pinks, and grays. Bow ties also became more varied to give the wearer more freedom of expression. European trends of diamond patterns and paisley prints made their debut in the United States men wear. Neckties were made from fine silk to knit wool. depending on the season and occasion. Scarf ties were common and originally constructed from silk or rayon. Collared pins and clips were added as a way to change up the look for their neckwear. Hats also added to their outfit. Top hats were worn for formal attire. Middle-class men would typically wear fedoras or bowlers, also known as derby hats, as well as more casual alternatives. And no outfit was truly complete without a rich watch. Companies like England National Watch Company and Rolex came into the scene. Rolex began making luxury wristwatches for the elite and produced the first waterproof timepiece made with prestigious metals and screwed down crowns, and a seized back. England National Watch Company, meanwhile, manufactured timepieces for the average working man. They were a staple for modern times.
Women's evening dresses distinguished themselves from their day dresses by showing off more skin. They tended to be closer to knee length and did not require a lot of undergarments. Stockings were sheer and sold in nude shades to give off the impression of bare legs. The front of the dress would remain high with square necklines, but the back plunged lower until the 1930s when it would reach the waist. Feathers and metallics became important pieces of the era's nightlife, along with sequins in 1922. Beading had become the rage of the decade, and what started as beads in small clusters to accent the hips, busts, shoulders, and/or hem were soon scattered all over in net fabric. This, of course, became what most know as the flapper dress. Flapper dresses were actually quite expensive, having to be hand-sewn individually into intricate patterns. Along with it came beaded or metalled mesh bags or coin purses, as we might know them today. They were often complemented with gloves made out of either leather, suede, or silk. Glove colors ranged from black to brown and ivory. Instead of day dress off skirts, in the evening women donned heels, which usually had several straps or a single Mary Jane style strap across the front. In the late 1920s, the T-strap became the most fashionable style of women's shoes. Gone were the days of showcasing wealth and jewels. Instead, the woman of the 20s found simplicity was the more desirable way to go. It was acceptable to wear one long bead, pearl, or tassel necklace in the evening. Interestingly enough, shawls had a resurgence throughout the period. Women found that they were practical for transportation and easy to wear over typical evening clothes. The 1920s held many pivotal turning points in fashion history, and many trends and fads fell into that timeline. Women became a target audience for clothing manufacturers, and with their newfound freedom, found it easy to explore through clothing. Smoking became a big part of women's lives because it worked as an appetite suppressant, makeup became more accentuated. The major cities of Paris, Berlin, New York, and Washington were the social melting pots of the 1920s cultural explosion, and most of those remain true today.
By the end of the 20s, people no longer had to wear the same clothes for years on end. Instead, there was a greater variety of patterns, shapes, styles, and colors than ever before. Because of this, they could change up their style as they saw fit to keep up with the latest fads. Men valued the quality and influence of their new fashion style had brought. From movies and magazines to sportswears and watches, their fashion was a turning point to where we are now today.
The 20s were a time of great change and exploration, and a major factor in it was its fashion.